And we are live. So this is the 19th of October, 2022, delivery sync and demo. We have a couple of actual discussion points in our agenda that is made around our OKRs. OKR season is approaching very fast. So in 11 days, actually, we have 12 days. We have Q4 starting with our OKRs. So we have actually this issue open where we collect a lot of ideas. The idea in general is to have an OKR that is going to be a group OKR together with team orchestration and team system together, but we also going to have some system-specific OKR or OKRs. That could be like an iteration on top of what we did before, or otherwise could be something new that we can work on since we made some work that enabled us to make a step further. In particular, I wanted to touch base on one OKR in particular that came out of the discussion together with Ruben. You, Skarbek, you might know as well, because I touched with you on this in our 101 earlier today. So just to bring you also, Ahmad, up to speed to that, I think we already spoke about that in any case. Ruben is working on POC on metrics, especially POC now is involved in the part where we work on manual job retries, how to measure manual job retries. The POC itself is not only for the manual job retries itself, but also to try to define the right foundations of how we can handle metrics and traces better within delivery. So how to collect metrics, but also where do we send those metrics? Is delivery metrics our in-house build solution good enough for what we need to do right now? And Ruben already found some good findings there. And in addition to that, also pipeline stage duration would be kind of the next iteration there. And for that, we would like to dog food a bit what the GitLab observability stack is offering. We already had some meetings with them. So I see this as a very powerful OKR. For the point one, because it will move in the direction of independent deployments, we will have to provide kind of already instrumented pipelines for these individual components we want to deliver. And having done all the work already on our side, we know already, okay, this is meaningful metrics we want to collect from our pipeline. This is meaningful to understand if this pipeline takes too long in one direction or the other. So already instrumenting these pipelines with this kind of metrics and traces is actually definitely a need that we'll have later on for independent components. In addition to that, on our discussion also with the observability group came up that they're thinking a lot about these traces and error tracking, but they're still very focused on maybe error tracking across clusters or services and not so much around pipelines. And I guess, if we have this problem, a lot of other companies going to have the same problem that we have that we are having. So I guess this is something that on one direction, we are kind of dogfooding their capabilities for traces. On the other direction, we are actually probably providing them good food for thoughts of which feature they could implement within the product. And actually, this is extremely powerful. So I asked Ruben today to summarize a bit this OKR. Is already listed in the. You already added it today in the OKR issue, and I just wanted to know what are your thoughts around this, if you think that there could be a good OKR or not, or if you have any concern around that.
I'll just post the link to the
Thank
issue.
you, Ruben.
So I do think that this OKR is beneficial. I remember Ruben had done some work for providing traces using, I think it was Jaeger at the time. He was able to import some of the data for our pipelines, and not just the release core data pipeline, but like all the pipelines that are part of it as well, which was really cool to look at. I think the benefit that this OKR provides for us is that we could provide a lot of feedback to a product team that would take this over and run with it and make it a product feature, which I think is like a fantastic goal to be a part of.
Yeah.
I also would love to be able to see if how do I say this? So like, you know, we have Ruben has proven we could get traces for individual jobs inside of a pipeline. I think what would be kind of cool to add on to this is, and Ruben, you know about this because I was asking you about this before I went on vacation, but we've got the ability to like mark or put specific statements inside of the shell output such that it kind of groups blocks of stuff together, and you could automatically hide that block, or you could have it automatically expanded depending on your use case. I was just playing around with this, but like it'd be really cool if we could make that feature also play into the instrumentation, because now you could take your pipeline and you have, say, 2 jobs in your pipeline. So you have 2 traces for each one of those jobs. Now for inside of the job, you have the individual code blocks that may take a period of time. So now you're instrumenting the actual code that's running inside of your job. So now you have this trace information that goes all the way down to like the line of code that is being executed in GitLab CI, which I think would be tremendously valuable long term, because now we, assuming this is a complete feature, we could go into CNG and be like, hey, this one particular step always takes 45 minutes. Why? We don't have to look at specific jobs, and we don't have to guess as to where in the CI job it's taken 45 minutes. We could go to the particular line of code inside of the CI job that's taken so long. I think that would be a really nifty feature of this capability.
Yeah, that is possible because you're talking about the section start and section end, right? So the cool thing is next to the section start, they put a Unix timestamp, and same thing next to the section end. So you actually already have the timestamp, so you can just parse the logs and get. So yeah, it is possible. But just a note here, products like Circle CI, they emit events for each like each command in the script that the job is running. So that's like the ultimate granularity, because you can measure each line. So here we'll be measuring groups, but still it's still better than what we have now.
Precisely.
Ahmad?
I extremely highly very support anything that would actually make our release manager's life easier, and this gonna make our life easier somehow. So I like it, and I was like I had this in my mind like some months ago that actually we need to have something to retry job like to be visualized somehow. I think I have noise around me. Sorry for this. And yeah, I couldn't think of anything back then. So Ruben, like, really kudos to you. And yeah, let's look it out.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Jenny. So
Oh, sorry about that. I was
no
running
worries.
late.
No worries. So if you have any extra thoughts about these metric issues, metric OKR, there is the comment left by Ruben on the OKR issue. Please go there, comment, add your upvote, not vote, or something like that. And it's going to be, any thoughts, any feedback is going to be extremely useful. Also because we probably will need to refine this further to try to understand, the exact scope of this OKR, what to work on and so on. So anything that comes to mind, if you see a use case, if you see what could bring like a very good beneficial value to everybody for the first iteration, just feel free there and go to and contribute to that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. There is another OKR proposal about to improve visibility into our deployment pipelines. I guess this one, Ruben, is one of your suggestion as well, if I recall correctly, from the OKR issues, and this to provide to stage groups the right visibility of what our deployment pipelines are working.
I think this one is similar to the previous one because
Okay.
to improve visibility, we have to improve the metrics that we collect first.
Okay, so do
it,
you
it kind
see?
of follows from that.
Perfect. So you see, in any case, bringing value, one particular kind of visibility into the deployment pipelines with the kind of metrics and traces that we want to bring up.
Oh, you were talking about visibility of the pipelines itself because
Yes.
most the developers don't have access to release tools and ops.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if we should work on that first, solving the visibility problem, or continue with the POC first and then worry about visibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, probably makes sense. Also, I was thinking about that. Actually, wanted to touch base in that. In the case that we are going to have independent pipelines for independent component to be deployed, probably the kind of access level or kind of visibility there will be at team level granularity. But correct me if I'm wrong, because we probably want to provide visibility into their own pipelines, but we don't want to provide probably visibility. Or maybe we want to provide visibility, to group configure and I don't know, group package pipelines that can see they both have visibility into each other. I don't see any problem on having full transparency there. I think is something more that we probably need to refine in that direction, understanding how else we are going to build this pipeline for independent components before thinking about which kind of visibility we can provide to them. I guess let me know if I'm wrong here, but there was also some issues about the sharing secrets that could have been seen in the pipeline logs. I'm not sure where we are with that. So I think this is also something we should take into consideration when we speak about this. Was this problem already solved?
I don't think it's fully solved because we do have one or two secrets. They're of lower priority, but they're still stored within our Git repo, which is kind of unfortunate. Eventually they'll get pushed out into an appropriate mechanism, but I think because they're kind of like the POC style of things, we haven't really put a lot of effort towards fixing that, which I think is fine. It's just long term we need to avoid this, and I think that would be a good exercise as a way to validate that we have solved that issue. The other thing related to your prior statement is that we don't precisely know exactly how these pipelines are going to be executed. This is a question that Graham proposed in response to one of my statements about the current POC as it stands. So there's more thought that needs to go into how we want to accomplish this, which might change some of the access that is currently prohibiting developers from being able to see the results of jobs and pipelines. So I think there still needs to be more conversation held. I still need to catch up on Graham's comment about this, and then I think we can continue the conversation. I don't know what we could chat about today that might bring us towards closer towards a resolution for that kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Skarbek.
Also, some time back, many months I think back, I tried to get the release tools job logs to be open to all developers, and what we found out at that time was that it needs to be closed because of the likelihood, or because if a token gets leaked, then and the job logs are open to everyone in the company, then the process to recover from that is much more complicated than if the logs are only visible to like 10 people in one team. So I'm guessing similar considerations will have to be taken for independent pipelines as well.
Yeah, good point. So I guess having proper access control, as probably spoke before, per group is going to be probably just to limit the audience.
Yeah.
Kind of each pipeline could be something. Okay, thank you.
One idea I've had for this is that, and again, this is an implementation detail and there are other considerations to take into account. But one of the thoughts I've had was that we could create some sort of a set of jobs inside of the canonical repo that developers work inside of, where each job is effectively mirrored wherever we're doing that deploy from. And instead of getting the job output, the purpose of the job in the canonical repo is just to ping the associated job that's performing the deploy and reporting some sort of status, or maybe like where it is in the process. That does not give them full visibility, but at least they know where the job is located so they could quickly link us to it. And that provides them with at least where they are in the process. So like it's reached out to staging, the deploy is occurring, we're waiting for pods to come up, for example. And if the job ends, obviously the canonical job would end as well. I don't like that solution, but it's at least an iterative method of getting us towards figuring out a more permanent solution, probably. But again, like I said, this requires a lot more thought.
Another way, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Another way to give developers visibility into a pipeline without giving them access to the job logs would be metrics and traces. So for example, if they have access to the metrics and traces, but not the pipeline itself. So say traces, if they have access to the trace, they can see exactly which job it terminated on. So that could also give the same visibility. Of course, there was another way that I was trying to explore many months back when I tried to get the job logs open to everyone. That would be to introduce a new permission into the GitLab product, which gives people permission to see the pipeline, but not the job logs. I think I had found that the permission already exists. It's just that we don't have anything on the UI allowing users to, give someone that permission or take it away.
So you're suggesting, if I understood correctly, that they could be able to see the pipeline, not to actually see the logs, but they could still see if, let's say, the status of the pipeline. So if it was failed, or if maybe at stage and job level, right?
They'll actually get the same UI that we get, but they won't be able to click into a job to see the job logs.
But they will see the execution status. So running, failed, canceled, and so on. Okay, that's actually would be also a good first iteration, I would say. But this requires a different access control method at product level, as far as I understood, right?
So right now you can give people access to your pipeline, but that basically gives them access to all the pipeline plus the job logs. What we need to do is introduce a UI control, which gives people access to the pipeline, but not the job logs. Yeah.
I don't know if product would accept something like that. That seems a little.
Yeah, that we'll have to check if product is willing to accept that.
Yeah, I understand. I think, I think we're also having a lot of those problems that a lot of other companies probably are having using our product, right? So we could also make proposal to product to say, how do you plan to solve this problem? Because this is like, you are the expert, the domain expert at least on these. So we probably need to find who could be someone that is willing also to take this into consideration. I mean, I guess at this point, we should probably draft our roadmap with independent deployments in mind and see where we get and see what we can get with the product in the current status. And then we can see if we can influence other stage groups roadmap with our inputs and so on, right? Because we're going to try to solve a pretty complex problem, especially like company-wide, we're going to deliver all the components. Thank you for the inputs. The point number 3, it was about, this is actually, Skarbek, this was like your input about how to roll out risky changes in production, right? These are, I guess, was a group OKR, was not a system OKR. But they see, a big part of the effort also being on system side as well, how to provide the right environment to do so. This would be amazing. the ability to do that. Do you think this is like definitely is worth our multiple OKRs from the way I've seen it? But maybe the scope that I see is maybe too big. Do you see that we could have like a minimal iteration that can get us closer to a target state that's gonna bring any value to, I don't know, Ruby 3 rollout?
So I guess a few things. One, this OKR is very ill-defined at the moment, or this idea is very ill-defined at the moment. I think the concept is there, but we need to figure out some of the details that allow us to iteratively put some sort of solution in place. This is also going to touch a lot of projects. Like we're going to need to figure out how to touch Omnibus. We're going to have to figure out how to touch CNG. And we need to figure out the infrastructure changes that would enable this to work as a whole. I don't see this as something we're going to be able to work on soon, just because I feel like there's just a lot of work that needs to be completed ahead of time. I think we kind of need to sit down and figure out what would block us from doing this today and try to work on those specific items before we try to make this an OKR that is usable for us.
Okay.
And that's simply because I think this is just a massive project. Like we need to work with at least distribution and the rest of reliability to enable this to be achievable. And I think some of the work that Ahmad is doing with cluster rebuilds could help with this. Because my initial thought is that we're not going to be introducing risky MRs at all times, but the ability to bring online something temporary like a quick cluster and send traffic to it with a modified weight would be beneficial. So I think the work that Ahmad is doing might be able to feed into the work we do here, because we could spin up something temporarily and turn it down really quickly with minimal interruption. Right now, we don't really have that capability. We could potentially leverage existing clusters, just creating a new namespace, but again, we still don't have any mechanism to do that itself. I think we have too much work to do to figure out in order to make this an OKR. I don't know how, like, I guess I don't know where to start with this at the moment.
Okay. I
ability-
mean, go ahead, Ruben, sorry.
Just a note, the ability to build a cluster might also help with what Graham was talking about, how to spin up a new environment quickly. So
Yes, so that is related to extending our patch policy to 3 versions back. And I think that is a fantastic thing that we need to consider doing as well.
And if we manage to do that, that seems like a first step towards this feature that we are talking about right now. So because you won't be able to send production data to it, or maybe you would, I'm not sure.
We would. So like the idea would be that we probably have like a minimal, like spin up a cluster that contains this specific code change, but still somehow in alignment with the code base, just like maybe the Ruby version is different. And it sees a very small portion of traffic, monitor for errors, compare the performance of that cluster to others, and drive results out of that testing. And we would need the ability to quickly turn on and off the traffic to that cluster, for example. Stuff like that. Like there's a lot of work that needs to go into this.
Yeah, there's a lot of like routing capabilities that I don't know if we have even today.
And like we're stuck on this really ancient version of HA proxy that we don't have any sort of dynamic configurations for. And like our Terraform at the moment, we reserve static IP addresses. We put those IP addresses manually inside of our configurations. Like all of that needs to be more dynamic to enable something like this to be operational.
So maybe we can start with things like the ability to build clusters or the ability to spin up a new environment.
So quickly rebuilding clusters is one stepping stone. I think after that, if we could figure out how to quickly rebuild clusters with minimal interaction, like effectively automating cluster rebuilds, that gets us even closer. And I think that will be a good target for one of the OKRs that Ahmad is currently the DRI on.
Yeah. So I think we can move that at this point. If no one has anything to add to the point 4, since we just connected there. Sorry for the noise. Sorry. So about the next iteration of cluster rebuild, right? So we have this run book. Hopefully by the end of the quarter, and we have a change request where we can replace a zona cluster in our staging environment. So our next iteration on top of that, it will be actually to understand what we will need to fully automate that part, right? So Skarbek, I think this was one of your comment in the OKR issue, and especially trying to understand in the moment that we replace a cluster, we start to do it in an automated way. A part that I really actually liked about understanding is the current traffic saturation we have at the level that we can tear down a cluster and bring one a new one. I mean, if it's a disaster event where the cluster just simply goes down and so on, but if it's something that we plan because we plan to take a cluster out of rotation for upgrading, something like that, having automation around understanding traffic saturation, load, and the ability actually to replace it or not replace it, I think would be actually a great step ahead in that kind of automation. The same way that probably we are doing now with the rollback, when we just, okay, can we roll back now? We have this checking a status, can we replace a cluster now and so on. That will be probably a great step ahead. I guess this is the most natural one from the work that we've done so far. Doesn't mean that we need to pick only one of these OKRs. We can definitely even pick more. We just need to understand so which scope we want to bring in. Let's keep also in mind that the beginning of this quarter, we'll have Ruben and Skarbek both in release management. So delivery systems also at half power here. We have a new starter at the end of November as well. So we have a few things to figure it out also to understand what we can take on our plates or not. Anyone wants to add anything about this cluster build? You, Skarbek, you think that we can find, or you, Ahmad, that you actually work also hands-on on it, a minimal iteration that can bring us a step closer to be kind of fully automating these rebuilds without considering, the HAProxy configurations and everything, that all the manual part that we know they're there.
So with the assumption that the upcoming test that Ahmad is planning will be completely successful and that we've got a fully usable runbook, I think our next step would be to take that runbook and figure out what is manual and try to automate it. And the first thing that screams out at me is two things. One, the network choices that we have to make is very static. There's nothing dynamic about that. And there is some reasoning for that, but I think if we could remove the nature of how static that is, that should enable us to be able to quickly create clusters with, we should be able to create clusters lowering the amount of planning that needs to go in ahead of time. But we need to figure out how the network traffic is going to be routed to various clusters, because we do some peering. That way our monitoring and observability stack works correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's item one that we need to figure out. And I think we can figure that out. It's just a matter of what we need to do with the network peering. The second thing I see is trying to figure out how to automate the deployment of stuff into our clusters. So we could create clusters via Terraform like we do today. I don't think we need to change that yet, at least. But be able to take a cluster from having nothing on it to having the entire observability stack plus GitLab, and making sure GitLab is up to date and at the same level as all the other clusters will be the next thing to work on. And then I think if we could solve all those two problems, the last piece is making sure that we could continue to deploy to the clusters without any interruption, meaning when a new cluster gets added, or if a cluster is replaced, like if authentication keys change, anything that's associated with that inside of our CI configurations gets updated in some way, shape, or form, such that when Jenny is the release manager and is saying, hey, let's deploy now, she doesn't have to get blocked on the fact that she has a red pipeline because this is a new cluster and it's failing to deploy because there's an authentication issue or it doesn't know how to reach it, etc., stuff like that. So there's two things that I think are good targeted items we could look into. The ordering could probably change depending on, you know, what's easier to work on and such, but
Okay. Ahmad, do you have any input as a first and executioner?
I think Scarbeck summarized it. I'm just like worried that we will need still some Terraform code to be able to build a cluster. So this part, I'm not sure how we can automate this. So we can basically say to Terraform, hey, build a cluster with this variable from the CI. But I'm not sure if we are going this path at all. The other thing, yeah, the workloads, worth looking at. And also the networking, as Scarbeck said.
and like one thing I
Perfect.
haven't considered at all is like what happens with our metric systems. Like we're really tied to the region label to tell us like which cluster is which, or like where workload is running. I would hope that we don't have anything hard coded that says, hey, everything is going to be in US East 1. We distinguish our regional and zonal clusters by that label. So if it's our regional cluster, it's US East 1. If it's our zonal clusters, it's US East 1D, US East 1C, US East 1B, etc. I hope that we don't have anything that's important inside of our metrics that limits us with that label. So if we deploy a cluster in US Central 1A, you know, hopefully that doesn't break things, but I'm going to know immediately that like a lot of our dashboards are probably locked with that region label. So it's going to make looking at metrics very difficult. Or if we want to compare metrics between clusters, we may not have that necessary label selector as a variable that we could use to select in our dashboards. We could certainly do this in Thanos probably, but there's going to be issues with looking at metrics and such. But that's more geared towards like expanding our clusters out of where we are today. So hopefully that's kind of a non-issue until later. I just worry what's going to happen if we add additional clusters versus what we have today.
Okay. So I guess there are a lot of business pieces that are actually, you know, the devil is in the details that we're going to discover later on in these kind of things. Well, thanks everybody for the discussion around all the OKRs inputs that we have. If everyone is keen, I have some extra minutes. I don't want to cut this one short, but I would also to give space to the demo from Ruben about using webhooks to measure job retries. So if someone is keen to stay a few minutes more, I would say to move to that.
It's a short demo, just like 2 minutes. All right.
Okay, Ruben, stage is yours.
Okay, so GitLab, the product has a feature called webhook events. So you put in a webhook URL and that URL will be called every time a certain event happens. So for example, we can leverage that to, suppose we want to count the number of retries. We can leverage job events to increment a counter every time a job is retried. So that's what I wanted to show. I have a simple Ruby server running, which is listening on port 8000, and I'll run GCK locally. So first, let's add the webhook with release tools. Sorry, I didn't check. Everyone can see my screen, right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay, so you put the URL here. You can put a token here. This should be random. And then choose which event you want to be notified on. So we want to be notified on job events. I've actually already added the webhook, so I won't add this again. But this is how you add it. And since it's localhost and not HTTPS, you can turn off SSL verification. You actually also have to allow localhost URLs in the settings, because our security settings by default, it doesn't allow localhost URLs in webhooks, but that's a problem only when you're testing on local. So we can test first. And you can see I received a webhook event over here. So that's job ID 602 auto deploy wait helm. Sorry, my niece wanted to say hi. And status success. Okay, so let's start a new pipeline. So the event will be the event webhook will be called for any event. So when a job is created, when it goes into pending state, when it fails, or when it is successful. We want to count only retries. So yeah, so here you can see, for example, auto deploy notify failure GST-CNY was created. Here you can see retry count. So 0 means this is the first time it's running. So for example, in delivery metrics, in the delivery metrics server, if retry count is above 0, we can increment a counter. We'll just wait until one job finishes and then retry it. I'll just cancel this. Even the cancellation should show up here, hopefully. Yeah. So all are being canceled. Okay, so now if we retry this, yeah. So auto deploy start, created state, retry count 1. So here, this is a bit of a problem because you can get multiple calls for the same state. Status created, we've got 2 calls. Then running. So we can use, we can store this in memory so that we don't count the same event twice. And hopefully any duplicates like this should be very close together. So you don't have to store it in memory for very long either. And now it's successful. Now if I retry again, this should increment to 2. Yeah. So we can use this to count the number of job retries in a pipeline. And similar to this, there are lots of other event payloads that can be received. So there's also a pipeline event payload. So we can use this to measure other things also about deployment pipelines. That's it for my demo. Any questions?
No questions, but I like it.
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly reactive.
By the way, you can also see the payload right in the GitLab UI. So
Oh.
So for example, it shows everything here. It's just that you need to click into it and GCK is a little slow. But yeah, so you can use the GitLab UI to check whether your webhook is actually getting called and stuff. I think this will be useful for capturing almost any kind of metric that we could want for deployment pipelines. This is the entire payload. And there's no retries count in the actual product. This attribute we'll have to add, because right now the payload has no indication if the job is being retried or it's running for the first time.
There's a active product feature to address just that. I don't know if it's due to be shipped this particular milestone, but there has been a lot of heavy discussion around it.
Oh,
If
that's
you'd
great.
like, I'll try to find that issue and send it to you.
Yes, please, because I was about to open an MR
Okay.
to add this.
Okay.
Thanks.
So you wanted to add the payload, that thing in the export
In the
to the
payload.
pipeline, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, if it's already being worked on by someone else, they probably have a different solution as well. So that'll be interesting to see.
Thank you, Ruben. Anything else you want to bring up in the recording? I'm gonna stop the live